Good day, wonderful viewers. I want to officially welcome you once again to another episode of AgriCorp Educative Series. This morning, this will actually be a continuation of the few series that we've done on the farm. It's still a continuation of our water sanitation and poultry that we did on the farm. But essentially, this morning we shall be dwelling on water sanitizers and poultry and their individual peculiarities. What are water sanitizers? By water sanitizers, we refer to a broad category of chemical agents approved for the reduction or total elimination of germs in water. You know, for water to be considered safe or drinkable for poultry, it has to be free of sediments, it has to be clean, it has to be tasteless, it has to be odorless, and it has to be free of germs. So, if you look at all the qualities that are itemized, you discover that about four of those qualities are actually physical qualities. Why the last quality has to do with the microbial quality of water, which has to do with the water being free of pathogens. Now we have a number of water sanitizers in poultry. We have, but for the purpose of this lecture, I'm going to dwell essentially on three of them. We have chlorine and chlorine-based sanitizer. We have hydrogen peroxide. Then we have ultraviolet light or ultraviolet rays. These are the three that we are going to be dwelling on essentially for the purpose of this presentation. Now, when we talk about chlorine and chlorine-related compounds, chlorine is actually the most popular form of water sanitizer used in poultry. It is the primary sanitizing agent for poultry. It involves, and this chlorination has to do with the addition of chlorine, pure chlorine or chlorine-based compound into water for the purpose of reduction of germs in the water. So, example of popular chlorine compounds that we have around is actually one, sodium hypochlorite. Your sodium hypochlorite is nothing but your regular bleach. You had me right. Yes, your regular bleach. Your regular bleach that you use in washing clothes is actually a sanitizing agent for water in poultry. But it has to be used in the proper manner for you to get the desired benefit from it. Then you also have another example of chlorine compound in water that can be used as water sanitizer in poultry is actually calcium hypochlorite. Chlorine or chlorine compounds in water produces what is preferred. When you dissolve chlorine or pure chlorine or chlorine compound in water, it gives hypochlorous acid, which is a strong germicidal compound. When you say germicidal, the word germicidal is actually derived from two words. You have germ and you have cider. Germ has to do with anything that causes diseases, and you have cider has to do with deaths. So when you say germicidal, anything that is germicidal in nature has the ability to kill. So when you say germicidal, it has the ability to kill germs in water. Then, however, in high pH condition, pH that is higher than chlorine can actually function effectively as water sanitizer within a particular pH range. Within a particular pH range, at higher pH level, any pH that is above 8.5, the chlorine will lose its ability to function as water sanitizer. It can only function as water sanitizer in lower pH of 6.5 and below. At such a pH, chlorine can actually function effectively as water sanitizer. But at higher pH, like maybe say 8.5 and above, chlorine will automatically lose its ability to function as water sanitizer. And that is the reason why before you even arrive at a choice of water sanitizer on your farm, you need to do a water test to check the pH of your water to know if chlorine will be suitable as water sanitizer on the farm or not. Because if you have a water sample, if your water sample is actually high in pH, maybe 8.5 and above, and you end up using chlorine as water sanitizer, you'll be fighting germs from time to time on the farm because it will be rendered ineffective. Another thing about chlorine-based sanitizer is that chlorine is easily deactivated in the presence of high level of organic matter in water. meaning that when you have enough dirt in the water, chlorine will be deactivated. When you have a number of, let me say, some sediments, and you agree with me that most of our water sources come with sediment. When most farmers get their water source from the well, and at times the well water will be very, very cloudy as a result of suspension of dust particle within the water. So chlorine in such a manner, in such an environment, might not be able to, you might not be able to get the full benefit of chlorine as a water sanitizer in such a condition. Then the level of chlorine, free residual level of chlorine that you need to have in water for you to, for the for you to, for it to be germicidal in nature is between 2 to 2.5 parts per million, meaning that you must have a circulating level of chlorine of between 2 to 5 parts per million for it to be germicidal. Anything lower than this, you won't get the germicide, you won't benefit essentially from the germicidal nature of chlorine and chlorine related compounds. And chlorine is very, very effective to take care of disease causing agents like E. coli, your salmonellosis, which is a popular infection in poultry, campylobacter, avian influenza. Chlorine is actually very, very effective in taking care of this disease causing agents. Then chlorine, like I mentioned earlier, chlorine and chlorine related compounds actually function best at a very, very lower pH, and when the level of contaminants in the water, organic contaminants in the water, is very, very low. Then the next set of sanitizing agent I'm going to discuss is actually hydrogen peroxide. Hydrogen peroxide is actually a rapid bactericidal action. It has a rapid bactericidal action. When you say bactericidal, two words, bactericidal. It has the ability to kill bacteria rapidly, and is effective against a wide range of viruses, yeast, fungi, and bacteria. All these organisms are effectively inactivated even in the presence of organic matter. Now, the difference between, let me quickly tell us the difference between using hydrogen peroxide as a water sanitizer on your farm and chlorine. Like I mentioned earlier, chlorine is easily deactivated in the presence of high level of organic matter in the water. But in the case of hydrogen peroxide is effective as water sanitizer even when the level of organic matter is high. Even when the level of organic matter contamination in the water is high, hydrogen peroxide is still very, very effective. Hydrogen peroxide works by creating a very powerful oxidizing agent. Meanwhile, chlorine works by, when you dissolve chlorine in water, it forms a hydrochlorous acid. But in the case of hydrogen peroxide, it works by oxidation. It kills the germs causing organism in the water by oxidation. It readily oxidizes protein and microbial enzymes within this organism and denature them. Then the next, for chlorine, like I mentioned earlier, you need a circulating level of 2 to 5 parts per million. But in the case of hydrogen peroxide, you need to a level of 25 to 50 parts per million for you to have an effective germicidal activity from hydrogen peroxide. It is highly effective, and it is highly effective in the presence of contaminated water. Then it is very useful agent in dislodging of biofilms. Biofilms build up in water lines. One major disadvantage of hydrogen peroxide is that it is very, very harmful. You need to be very, very careful while handling hydrogen peroxide so that you won't suffer from any form of burns. Then the next sanitizing option that we are going to discuss is ultraviolet rays. Ultraviolet light water disinfection simply employs the use of ultraviolet light or rays. The ultraviolet bulb is actually out in a canister. If you actually watch our previous presentation on the farm, we showed you the canister that is actually part of our setup on the farm. The canister houses the ultraviolet bulbs, which emits ultraviolet lights. And what ultraviolet light does to germs is that it denatures their DNA and their RNA. You know that DNA and RNA are actually the building block of life. So once the DNA and the RNA of this organism is denatured, the ability to cause infection is greatly reduced. And one beautiful thing about ultraviolet rays is that it is highly effective. In fact, with ultraviolet rays, you can actually take care of, let me say, 99.9% of the germs in the water. It can take care of that. It is very, very effective. It's just a one-time, how do I put it, expense. Once you invest in buying an ultraviolet canister or a setup, it's a one-time expense. You don't need to start investing on a weekly basis on chemicals. And ultraviolet rays does not entail the use of chemical in water sanitation. But there's a downside to this ultraviolet. Before I go to the downside, I said it denatures the DNA and the RNA of the disease-causing organism. Once this is done, the reproductive ability of those organisms is actually affected. Once the reproductive activity because viruses and bacteria and viruses causes serious havoc to our flock by their rapid ability to multiply. If you have, let me say, in a water sample, if you take a water sample in the morning and you have, like, let me say, 100 bacteria in that water, by the evening period, if you go back, you would have had, let me say, close to 1 million or millions of bacteria in the water. They have the ability to develop, to multiply, to divide rapidly. But with ultraviolet exposure, it renders these organisms, let me use the word, I don't want to use the word, it's not important, but it affects the ability to divide in the water system. It affects the ability to multiply, so limiting the havoc that is being caused to the to birds. Then one of the major downside of ultraviolet rays is that it does not have a pre-exposure disinfecting ability. What do I mean? If you have a tank of water and you add a particular quantity of chlorine or hydrogen peroxide to that water, even beyond the source of administration, the chlorine and the hydrogen peroxide still remains effective along the drinking line, because the chemical will still be carried along the drinking line. But since with ultraviolet disinfection, we are not making use of chemical. It is only at the point of exposure that the organism is being killed. But even beyond the water source, contamination happens along the water line because of what is being referred to as biofilms. So one of the major disadvantages of ultraviolet disinfection is that it does not have a post-exposure ability to sanitize the water that you give to your birds. So for everyone that is considering this form of water sanitation, it has to be combined with a chemical form of sanitation, so that after you expose the water coming from the bowl to ultraviolet rays, you have to employ probably chlorination or iodine or hydrogen peroxide to take care of the post-exposure contamination that might happen along the line. Then one way for you to get the best out of your ultraviolet setup, you need to install filters on the farm, minimum of 2, so that it can take care. The filter, the essence of the filter is actually to remove particles that might actually be coming from the water source, so that the germ causing agents can actually get maximum exposure to UV light. Earlier I mentioned biofilms. What are biofilms? Biofilms are complex communities of matrix of different species of enclosed or encased microbial cells cooperating with one another for survival, firmly attached to any hydrated surface. Okay, let me cite an example. Just take a glass cup of water, put it on a table where it is totally away from any form of disturbance for 7 days. Then go back after 7 days, pour away the water, then use your finger to touch the internal surface of the cup. You discover that it is slimy, it will become slimy or slippery in nature. That is what biofilms is in simple terms. So even in poultry drinking line, you have biofilms build up along the line, and since the internal surfaces of pipe are not washed regularly, the biofilm will gradually begin to build up, and it will provide a shield, a house for bacteria, viruses, fungi, and all manners of organisms. You know, we say it is a complex community of organisms depending on one another for survival. And in this slimy house, which is the biofilm, even if you put disinfectants, the viruses, the bacteria, the mold, they will be protected from the harmful effect of these disinfectants. Even when you use antibiotics in your water line, the biofilm will still provide a protective cover for these germ causing agents. And that is the reason why, irrespective of how good your water sanitation is on the farm, from time to time you must engage on line soaking and washing, flushing on a regular basis to dislodge every form of biofilm that might have built up along the line, so that you don't end up with contaminating your water even after spending money on chemical sanitizing agents and UV lights. So we have come to the end of this particular episode. Um, Make do to follow us across all our social media platforms. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, YouTube. Thank you so much.